GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Energy companies are breaking down people's front doors to put in very expensive prepayment meters. We debate, do they simply have too much power? Rishi has been in power for 100 days. We'll assess just how is he getting on. Joining me on Talking Pints, Charlton Athletic legend Alan Kirbishley. That and much more, all coming up after the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Nigel, thank you. The news at 7 o'clock from GB News. Lancashire police say they've located a potential new witness in the search for Nicola Bailey. That's after they'd released an image of the woman who was seen in the area where the mother of two had disappeared last Friday. The 45-year-old went missing in St Michael's on Wyre while she was walking her dog. As part of the hunt, divers are still searching the nearby River Wyre. The Bank of England today raised its base rate from 3.5% to 4%. That's the 10th increase in a row, adding that inflation has begun to fall. It also says the UK is set to enter recession this year, but stresses the economic downturn could be shorter and less severe than previously expected. The Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, supports the Bank of England's decision.
But we recognise it is very difficult for families, businesses up and down the country when interest rates go up. But much harder for them would be if we didn't take decisive steps to bring down inflation. And that's why the Bank of England is absolutely right to do what they've done today. And we in the government must make sure we support them by what I do in the budget to make sure that we make it easier, not harder, for them to do what we all want to do, which is to halve inflation.
The boss of British gas owner Centrica says he's horrified contractors for the company broke into customers' homes to fit energy meters. His comments came shortly after the energy regulator Ofgem announced it was launching an urgent investigation. It follows a Times sting in which an undercover journalist accompanied debt collectors who reportedly entered the homes of vulnerable people to force-fit prepayment meters. Energy and Climate Minister Graham Stewart says it's appalling.
I brought in all the suppliers last week to talk about how we better look after vulnerable people, because there are clear rules and they have obviously not been followed, and therefore I need the regulator and I need the companies to do the right thing by people who are in the most difficult of circumstances and have been treated on this evidence appallingly.
Shell says its profits have increased by more than 53%, with earnings of more than £68 billion last year. It's the company's highest profit in its 115-year history. The energy giant has benefited from soaring oil prices due to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. A Downing Street spokesman has said the Prime Minister absolutely understands, however, people's anger over Shell's record profits at a time of soaring household energy bills. And lastly, an independent inquiry into the 1998 Omagh bombing has been ordered by the Northern Ireland Secretary. The announcement follows a long-running legal battle brought by Michael Gallagher, whose son Aidan was killed in the real IRA bombing. 29 people died in the explosion in County Tyrone. Hundreds more people were injured. That's the latest news from the GB Newsroom. Now back to Farage.
Good evening. Energy very much back in the news today as Shell announced overnight record profits. Yes, their last year profits are 32 billion sterling, lead to howls of outrage from Ed Miliband and many others. This is disgusting. The windfall tax of 75% simply isn't big enough. Well, folks, let me give you a little bit of perspective. Shell are a global company. They've chosen to headquarter in the United Kingdom. They do business all over the world. The UK part of their revenue is just 5% of the 32 billion, and they're projected in the next tax year to pay hundreds of millions of pounds to the Treasury. It's easy to say, look, my energy bill is very expensive. It's not right. But the fact that firms like Shell want a headquarter in the UK, I would argue, is a good thing, not a bad thing. Now on to the even bigger story. The even bigger story that we covered here a few weeks ago, and it's this. British Gas, Centrica and others. They are literally being given magistrates' orders to break into people's houses and to install, without the consent, meters, prepayment meters, that are very much more expensive than they are for anybody else. Not only is it an absolutely gross violation of people's privacy, but it seems to me these energy companies have simply got far too much power. Let me know what you think. Do the companies have too much power? What can be done? Farage at gbnews.uk. I have to say, I think the whole thing is shocking. I mean, this is forced entry. We've also covered over the last few weeks the standing orders. They put your standing order up and you finish up with a surplus of 700 quid, 1,000 quid, whatever it is, and we have to help some of you get that money back. I mean, it strikes me, I was pro-privatisation in so many ways, and yet we finished up, it seems to me, with a complete and utter dog's dinner. But remember, behind all of this is the neo-religious pursuit of goals of net zero. Well, joining me tonight to discuss all of this and more is a man who spent a considerable amount of time writing as a freelancer for the Mail, the Sun, the Telegraph. He's got a brand new book out, published today, which no doubt Ross Clark will tell us about at some point in this conversation. Ross, just to begin, this whole idea that a magistrate, and by the way, Centrica say they will stop requesting these orders, but we'll see what comes of that. But your electricity provider, your gas provider, can easily get a magistrate's order, and somebody can almost, forced entry into your home and put in place a prepayment meter. And what people are paying on that is far more than they should be, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And it's a sort of underhand way of cutting people off. In the sort of bad old days, an electricity company, you didn't pay your bill, they could come and cut you off. And, governments tried to stop that because it was putting very poor people in sort of living in insanitary conditions. So what they do now is there's a break into your house, change your meter for a prepayment meter, but then you've got to buy the sort of vouchers. You can't get hold of the vouchers, and you pay more. People end up being cut off. It's a sort of backdoor way of people cutting people off from the power.
Now, we have heard stories, and particularly with that cold snap that we had before Christmas and projected another one to come starting next week, we did get stories of people that were cut off around the country. Do we have any idea of the magnitude of that?
Well, it is very, very large number of people. It's not just the numbers, it's the sort of people. I mean, in the Times investigation, and it's thanks to the Times that we know about this.
Who did very good work on this, by the way.
Yeah, it was a woman, she's got a 4-month-old baby, 4 other children, trying to bring them up in a 1-bedroom flat. She was on quite a good deal with an energy company 2 years ago. That company went bust, and without any choice, she was shunted on to Centrica, British Gas, and her payments increased 7-fold. And unsurprisingly, she was unable to pay them. So what happens then? Bunch of debt collectors arrive at the door, break in.
I mean, come on, heavies.
Heavies arrive at the door. I was thinking of a polite way to say
no,
it.
don't.
And change a meter. And, the other thing, government has sort of helped us out this winter with this sort of £400 handout and also through the energy price guarantee. But that £400, that's not getting through to people, to many people who are on prepayment meters. Because, you and I, we have, our energy accounts. The government just stuffs our account automatically with this money, whether we need it or not. But if you're on a prepayment meter, you've got to sort of claim those vouchers and redeem them at a shop and so on. And the money's just not getting through to the people who really need it.
And, you know, I talked already about direct debits and people finishing up with massive surpluses with all these companies without even knowing it. I got a case today of somebody whose meter's faulty and they're saying, well, we'll install a smart meter. Well, he said, no, they're going to fine him for putting in a conventional meter. I've got Thames Water threatening me, letters every fortnight, that unless I get a water meter, you know, I'm going to start paying a higher tariff. It seems, and getting back to the central debate we're having tonight, that these companies have been given, through legislation, the most astonishing power.
They have, and you look at these smart meters, they'll sort of try to sell them to us on the grounds that they'll save us money. That's a load of rubbish. The reason smart meters are being installed into houses is twofold. One, it's easier to put people onto prepayment deals. They can do it remotely. But also, it enables in the future for Uber-style surge pricing to be introduced in the electricity system. And the reason we're going to have this is because government's trying to build a national grid on renewables, intermittent wind and solar, and when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine, you know, the amount of energy being generated collapses. At the moment, we're coping because we turn the gas power stations up and down.
And we're now getting ready for some coal-fired power stations to perhaps get bought back.
But from 2035, government said it's going to eliminate all gas-fired power stations, all fossil fuels, and we don't have the storage, we won't have the backup, and the only way the government's sort of trying to sort of make up this gap is through sort of managing demand by trying to tell people to turn off their dishwasher
we'll
for a couple
pay you
of hours.
to turn off the electricity. That was what was happening a couple of weeks ago.
At the moment, it's an incentive, but in future, it will be the other way around. It will be a penalty, surge pricing.
Yeah, it was the beginning of rationing, was my view. Now, America is not going down the net zero route, but is going down massive subsidy route. Does that disadvantage us?
It does, hugely. You look at... There's a company in Oxfordshire or Bedfordshire which manufactures electric vans. It's now suddenly going to switch its production to America. Why? Because in Britain, there's huge, the energy prices are being driven up and up. In America, on the other hand, Joe Biden wants to chuck a great subsidy at it. So it's thinking logically, how can we survive, thrive as a business? We'll go to America. And you think, net zero was supposed to be about all these green jobs, boosting the green economy.
We endlessly hear that net zero will bring huge benefits to the British economy. Yeah, all I can see is refining closing, chemical plants closing, aluminium smelters closing. I mean, this narrative, and I'm looking at the building from which it emanates, with a huge amount of media support. How do we counter this, Ross?
But just by telling people the reality of, the fact that the government has, not just the government, Parliament, nodded through this net zero target without even a vote in Parliament. No vote. And without any idea of how the government was going to get to net zero. It couldn't tell us then in 2019. It still cannot tell us. The Treasury was asked to come up with a figure, the price of going net zero. It couldn't do so. Said it's too difficult. We don't know how we're going to get to net zero, and therefore we cannot put a price on it. And yet it's written into law. Joe Biden's done put that.
Your book, published today. Let's have a look. Give us a flash to the cameras.
There we go.
So, not zero. So, Ross Clark, what does this book tell us?
I just started off asking myself the questions that MPs should have asked themselves before they nodded this through Parliament, but failed to do so. And I've looked at, how are we going to get there? I've looked at housing, I've looked at transport, I've looked at energy, I've looked at industry, section by section. And what you find all the time is there's a possible technology there, but it's very, very expensive. It hasn't been scaled up. And here we are. We've got 27 years to eliminate all these
I was hearing in
emissions.
2000, Nigel, don't worry about wind energy because the battery storage is just around the corner. And here we are in 2023 and we're no closer.
Well, here's... Just chuck a couple of figures at your listeners. Pacific National Laboratories looked around the world at the cost of generating energy from wind is approximately $50 per megawatt hour. That's fairly similar to what gas was before the spike.
Yeah.
To store the energy in lithium batteries, $300 per megawatt hour. It's 6 times as much. And of course, if you're going to use stored energy, you've got to pay to generate it, and then you've got to pay to store it. You do your figures.
Well, I've got to say, Ross, good luck with the book. Thank you for coming on this show on a regular basis and helping us with some of these numbers. And for those of you at home, we present on this show all sides of this debate. But, I think you know my opinion. I think the rush to net zero is absolute madness. It's a self-inflicted wound upon this people, particularly amongst those on low incomes. And all the while, China build 80 new coal-fired power stations every year. In a moment, we've got some exclusive polling on what you think about our membership of the European Convention on Human Rights. We'll debate that. Can we leave? Is it possible?
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prison. I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back.
Eamon Holmes, back on the TV with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes. Already to bless.
Yeah. Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So, I asked you, do the energy companies have too much power? I certainly think they do. One viewer says, scrap all green taxes and save every household 25% off their energy bills. Well, electricity, that's certainly true. Scrap the standing charges, reduce VAT, scrap the net zero green agenda nonsense and save the economy billions. Well, I agree with much of that. The one thing I have to say that would be the really easy thing to do would be to remove the 5% VAT on domestic energy bills. because that was something we had to have as members of the European Union. Why the government haven't removed that and said to people, hey guys, here's a big Brexit win, is completely and utterly beyond me. And it's part of what I was saying earlier this week, on the 3rd anniversary of us leaving the European Union. The government haven't done enough to give people clear, identifiable benefits. Ryan says the main reason that the energy companies have so much power is the green agenda. If we started fracking and extracted the vast quantities of our own coal, big energy's influence would be greatly reduced. Well, Ryan, I thought it was fascinating today that Ed Miliband, who of course is back now as the shadow energy spokesman, and when he's challenged on this, challenged on the fact that we will need fossil fuels in varying degrees, but we'll need fossil fuels for many decades to come, and wouldn't it be better to produce them here at home rather than importing them from elsewhere, just simply says no. I mean, there is no logic to these people. Their fanatical, almost religious devotion to net zero blinds them from any sense of logic. And one more thought we'll get. One viewer says it would, this is in reference to how much power these energy companies have got, it would essentially, forcing their way into people's private property and charging whatever they like to, it's a mess. No, it's not a mess. You're wrong. It's a complete disgrace. Now, Rishi Sunak has absolutely promised, and by the way, we're 100 days in to his premiership, he's absolutely promised he will stop the boats. But there are many of us who think that might be difficult, giving British judges, giving the fact they will lean again and again on the European Convention of Human Rights, backed up, of course, by that court in Strasbourg. We'll talk in a moment about the history of that court, why it was set up with perhaps the best possible intentions, but now, as I believe, its baleful influence. GB News is people polling, and we produce those figures every Friday. One of the questions we asked people was, did people think we should leave the European Convention on Human Rights so that it can control immigration? Completely agree, or somewhat agree, 38%. Disagree, 32%. Now, the 30% wouldn't say didn't know. Now, you could argue that's a leading question, because we've asked about ECHR and controlling borders at the same time. I would counter that by saying most people, if you presented them with ECHR, wouldn't actually know what it is. I think there is a growing concern that in Brexit Britain, a court in Strasbourg still has a say. Now, joining me, immigration lawyer Ivan Sampson, friend of this programme. Just a quick potted history. This European Convention on Human Rights, the court in Strasbourg, this was done to stop abuses such as were going on in Austria and Germany in the early 30s. It was with good intentions, wasn't it?
It was, and what it does is it protects the individual from unlawful interference by the state. But your poll, I mean, it'd be interesting to know what parts of the convention people don't agree with. I'll give you one, the right to life. Do you agree with that one?
Do I agree that I need some European convention giving me the right to life? No, they can go to hell. Yes. I've got those freedoms in my own country.
Freedom of expression, do you agree with that?
I don't. No, Ivan, here's the point. This is my point. I don't think we need a European convention to give it to us. Whatever the imperfections of our country, we have, I would argue, since Magna Carta, actually lived in the freest of all European countries. Why do we need this stuff to be given to us?
Because you can't have a government with unfettered rights against citizens. You need to have some protection for individuals.
Okay,
and that must be built into a democratic society. You can't have, otherwise we would live in some sort of dictatorship. And you don't have these rights in China or Saudi Arabia. And there's a reason you don't have these rights.
But this is the United Kingdom.
Yes, I understand that. But as I said to you before we came on air, the reason we have gay marriages, transsexuals get married, is because of human rights laws.
Shouldn't we decide that in our own country through a parliament whose MPs we elect or sack?
Yes, we should, and that Parliament has elected to have the Human Rights Act as part of our legislation. And that's what Parliament has decided. So, and they've done it because the principles of it protects everyone. And if there are fundamental principles that a civilised society would have entrenched in law, why would we come out of it?
Why should a decision to deport people to Rwanda, why should at 10 p.m. at night, a judge whose name we don't know, probably a man or woman with no legal training, because that's what the ECHR court's made up of, jurists, not judges, why should an unnamed judge in a foreign court decide what we can and can't do in terms of controlling our borders?
Because they have a legal right. The English courts cannot overrule the jurisdiction of the European Court.
Which is why, OK, that's the current situation, and I get that, and I understand why we signed up to it back in 1949, whatever it was. You know, it was a post-war world, and we helped write the rules, indeed, for much of it. I get all of that. But, you know, the point is, shouldn't, particularly in Brexit Britain, shouldn't the ultimate arbiter of what we can or cannot do be our own Supreme Court?
And they are, but not for the convention rights. Look, if I want to be protected against unlawful interference by the government against me, I wouldn't want a British judge deciding that.
Oh, come on.
No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't. If I wanted absolute independence, I would want a judge outside the country who I'm fighting against. So, in actual fact, I think they do an excellent job, the European Convention on Human Rights. And the other thing about will it stop border crossings, it will not.
But hang on.
It's no magic pill.
We struggle to deport people. You know, Article 8, the right to a family life, all these things get quoted. British judges draw on it. I mean, Ivan, let's get to the crux of this. We are not deporting people, even those who failed asylum. And we come up against the ECHR time and time again, and that is unacceptable.
It's simply not true, Nigel. Look, the courts side with the government when you're arguing Article 8. I do these cases. And time after time, the tribunal judges side with the Home Office. You have to be living here 20 years to come within the rules of Article 8. 20 years. And the government's codified it. Look, and the benchmark for engaging Article 8 is very high.
Why are we not deporting people who illegally come to Britain and fail asylum? Why not?
Quite simply because we haven't got the systems to do that. The law allows the government to do that. The Home Office has the powers to deport people, to certify applications, to make applications inadmissible. The powers are all there.
I tell you something. We're going to return to this ECHR debate. This is going to become a bigger issue in British politics. 68% of Conservative voters want to leave the ECHR. There are going to be voices within the Conservative Party making this argument. We at GB News are miles ahead of this debate, and it's going to come back. And Ivan, thank you for being a regular on this show and being as passionate as you are. And if you tune in to GB News' breakfast show tomorrow, we will have the rest of our people polling many, many interesting questions, including how is Rishi Sunak doing 100 days into being the British Prime Minister? In a moment, we'll debate that here too.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion, and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every weekend, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Bigger and better, starting at 8 p.m. Friday and Saturday.
Can't be too safe. Bring it on. Has there ever been a more innuendo feature?
And Sundays, we're on at 9.
It's ridiculous.
Just get on with it. Maybe you should get a proper job.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, Liz Truss lasted about 44 days, the same time Brian Clough lasted at Leeds United. But Rishi, he sailed way past that. He's now been the Prime Minister for 100 days. And this was the man, the grown-up in the room, the man that was going to bring stability. And I suppose you could argue he's brought a certain degree of stability. But joining me is Darren McCaffrey, GB News' political editor. Well, he's been there 100 days, but I understand some new polling coming out tonight, not looking that pretty for him.
No, and this is the big problem, isn't it, for Rishi Sunak, is that even with, I think, a sense of stability, we have to remember where we were, those panicky financial markets, the pound falling, real concerns about actually drawing back on that. And he has managed to do that. Him and Jeremy Hunt have, to agree, you're right, managed to do that. But the problem is the polls are just inching, continuing in the wrong direction, not just for the Conservative Party, but for him personally. We have to look at it. He's lost 2 cabinet ministers in the space of, 3 months. He, I would reckon, is on the verge of losing a third. Almost feels with Dominic Raab we're in a déjà vu situation with the Deems Zahawi, where there seems an inevitability about it, I would say, Nigel.
Rightly or wrongly.
Rightly or wrongly, he's always denied these allegations.
Yeah.
Though they do date back for years, and you get different things from different people, but there is just another sense that, this is a problem that's been dragged out, that's overshadowing some of the announcements the government's trying to make. And I think the other big problem that he faces, Rishi Sunak, is not just that kind of mire of scandal that people continue to talk about, is the disquiet within the Conservative Party. And you and I have talked about this an awful lot in the past. There is a large section of the party, by the way, who actually got rid of Boris Johnson because they didn't think he was a Conservative, who liked Liz Truss, who thinks that the entire government's plan for the last 4 or 5 years has not been Conservative enough. They want to see taxes cut, they want to see they want to see Liz Truss economics.
Yes, so you've actually got the Trussites, and they do exist, and my intelligence tells me there are 30 to 40 of them.
People like IDS, Ian Duncan Smith, John Redwoods.
And they really think that mistakes may have been made, but actually Truss and Kwarteng were on the right route, attempting to reduce the size of a state. Then you've got the Borisites. I mean, it's almost like Bonnie Prince Charlie. It's drinking toast to the king, literally across the water in DC at the moment. So there are 3 factions here, aren't there?
There are 3 factions, and there are people who simply just do not like Rishi Sunak because he got rid of Boris Johnson. Those. At the same time, let's look back and stand at where the Conservative Party's options are. I don't think any of them are terribly palatable, or indeed terribly popular. Boris Johnson is not ridiculously popular with the public. I'm sorry, he just isn't. Liz Truss certainly is not. And I just cannot see the Conservative Party changing leader again out of the next election. I mean, when they were told that away day at Chequers a couple of weeks ago, the Cabinet, that there is a narrow path to victory, it is going to have to be, I would suggest, it's very narrow, Rishi Sunak. There's a poll out tonight suggesting only 1 in 10 voters think the Conservative Party have a chance of winning the next election. 1 in 10. And that it's 2 in 10, by the way, of those who voted for the Conservative Party at the last election. That's how bad it's looking. And think for Rishi Sunak, the problem with all this, it becomes, a self-fulfilling prophecy where the Conservative Party feel and look like they're going to lose, and it becomes almost an inevitability because that's where opinion is. Now, the government would turn around and say inflation will fall this year. The economy is not looking quite as bad as it was. We heard from the Bank of England today that this recession is going to be a lot shallower. That I think the election...
As they put rates up.
Well, as they put rates up, and having got predictions wrong, it must be said, in the past. And the election is not, I think, 18, 20 months away. I mean, I think it's going to be in the autumn of 2024. That's a long way away. And consistently, you know what? Yes, the Conservatives are unpopular and Rishi Sunak is heading in the wrong direction. But there is also still not a massive love-in for Keir Starmer. And politics can change. But it's such a tricky situation. It really, really is.
If only 2 in 10 of Conservative 2019 voters think there's a chance of them winning the next election, they look doomed. Darren, as ever, thank you for your analysis. Now, quick thought here on what the Farage moment. Discrimination. Yes, we all abhor discrimination. It's dreadful. It's awful. It needs to be stamped out because it's going on within the RAF. Yes, absolutely. 160 RAF places given to women and to ethnic minorities in preference to white pilots. Now, this actually led to Lizzie Nichol, who was in charge of the programme, resigning. This is all in the name of inclusion and diversity. It's not in the name of who might be the best for the job. Jolly good job we didn't use these criteria back in 1940, otherwise we'd all be speaking German. But interestingly, it was also announced today that there is a problem, that women cannot fly the F-35 jets as the helmets are too heavy for them. They've looked at lighter helmets, but doubt the safety standards. People should be picked for whatever job it is in life on the basis of their ability, regardless of class, race, gender, sexuality. And unless we can get back to Martin Luther King's vision that we judge people not by their identities, but by the content of their character, we're going to live in an increasingly divided society. And I've got to tell you, for one, I do not want that. I do not like that. And it will lead to huge resentment, I think, amongst much of the white male population in this country. Final What the Farage. The Jockey Club, of all institutions, have decided that for race meetings, yes, and it's almost unbelievable, this, because they're actually talking about Cheltenham and Epsom, not Royal Ascot yet, that the dress codes are going to change and people should dress as they feel most comfortable and most, confident. There should be an emphasis on diversity and inclusion. I mean, God help us, there are no standards left in this country at all, unless, of course, you think I'm completely old-fashioned and totally outdated. And if you do, I couldn't really care less. Now, in a moment, I'm going to be joined on Talking Pints by football manager, Charlton Athletic legend, Alan Kirbishley. And we're going to ask him what makes a great football manager.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere. Amazing! You see, amazing! You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel. Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful. Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
It's time for Talking Pints. I'm joined tonight by Alan Kirbishley. Alan, welcome to the programme.
I've seen this before. Have you got? You outdrink most people, don't you?
Well, I do my best.
Someone's had a bet with me that I outdrink you.
Oh, gosh. If the bet's on, I don't mind if you win.
No, you'll win.
The point about Talking Pints, of course, isn't what we drink. It's the thought of sitting down and having a chat about life and about the world. And so we love guests that have lived a bit. That have done a bit, and you definitely tick that box.
A little bit.
So, Alan, you're a proper East End boy. You know, Dad was a docker, all the rest of it. You've gone on and done what you've done. But your brother, Tom, he's had a pretty amazing life too, hasn't he?
Yeah. And, well, he's 80 now, and he can't quite believe he's got to 80 in the business
Well,
he's been
tell
in.
folks what he did.
Well, he's in the music business, and he's been the manager of the Who for 50-odd years. At the moment, he's got UB40 as well. Judas Priest, one or two other things. Done the films, Tommy, Quadrophenia. So he's got. You should get him on.
I think if
but
you
you don't drink anymore, so
that's all right. We don't mind. We'll give him a J2O or something, or a lemonade or whatever. But I mean, as you say, to manage the Who for 50 years and be on the road and live to 80 is really quite impressive in many ways.
He's seen some things.
For you, was it always going to be football?
Yeah. I was brought up in Canning Town. But football was, you played out in the streets, that's what you did. And you didn't go home until your mum called you, and 9 o'clock in the evening in the summer. So, yeah, it was always football. It was always West Ham. I could have gone to a lot of other clubs, but West Ham was the club, and I joined as an apprentice when I was 15, 16.
And, of course, West Ham, I mean, what a glamour club it was.
At the time, yeah.
Well, wasn't it? You know,
Yeah.
I mean, in fact, we had Jeff Hurst on this slot a couple of months back, but with, Bobby Moore, Jeff Hurst, West Ham won the World Cup, Martin Peters, and it was, I mean, and your football career, you did well in your football career. You played after West Ham for several clubs, but it was what really made, at Curbs, as they call you, what really made
right.
Curbs the household name that you become in soccer and elsewhere, was that move to Charlton, wasn't it?
Well, it was, and it was quite an interesting reason why I went to Charlton. I was playing for Aston Villa in the Premier League, and Charlton was in Division 1, if you like, the Championship, relegation battle. But the North-South divide, talking about levelling up now, but the North-South divide was so great that I had to come back to London, else I would never have been able to afford to come back to London. So when Charlton came in for me, it wasn't the ideal club. Obviously in the Championship, I was playing in the Premier League with Villa. But it gave me an opportunity to get back, because if I left it any longer, I would never be able to get back in the housing market. So I came back, and obviously it was one of the best moves I ever did, because I played for Charlton for a couple of seasons, went off to Brighton, and then Lenny Lawrence, the manager, brought me back as a player coach. And then after a couple of months of being a player coach, Lenny left, and suddenly the job opened up. and I took it on with me and Stevie Gritt as joint managers, which was
to begin with,
unheard of at the time.
Yeah, that must be difficult.
It was, because
how do you choose who's going to play and who's not going to play?
We was being called Pinky and Perky and Bill and Ben. And it got to a stage that we decided that we'd do 2 press conferences on the spin, because, you play at home one week and away the next, so you take the majority of your wins at home. So we didn't want to have it that, one person was going into the press conferences where they'd won and saying nice things. So we actually discussed so many things. We had to make sure we got our story right with the players, with the directors.
Never show any daylight between the two of you, I guess. Because that way lies disaster.
Yeah,
doesn't it?
Sat there and we planned it out meticulously, really. That we'd never, if I didn't agree with what Steve wanted, and he won the day, I'd never show that. That was the way it was. And when the chairman phoned up, we had to make sure. So the chairman would phone up and say, "What's the team for Saturday?" "Oh, I thought you might be playing Farage." And Steve would say, no, we've agreed that, we're doing that. Then if he phoned me, and I'll go, no, I can't believe we're playing Farage this week. So we had to make sure we had our story straight. And we did, and I think we was really successful, because the club had just come from Selhurst Park and went to Upton Park, sharing, and we was playing in front of 5,000 gates at Upton Park. And I think we'd done really well. We finished 7th in the first season. And it infused a lot of people to get behind the club, especially a couple of directors, Richard Murray, Martin Simons, etc., who pumped money in to get us back to the Valley. And, if we hadn't been successful back home, if we hadn't been successful at Upton Park, I don't think we'd have got that back in.
And then you obviously go out on your own, you're doing it on your own, and it's up into you take them up into the Premiership, and it's tough, and it's back down after a bit. And then it's back up again. I mean, twice you took them up to the Premiership.
Well, we went up through the playoffs. Everyone remembers that game, obviously. Came down on the last game of the season. But what we did, Nigel, was quite interesting. When we went up, I think the monies at the time was about £10 million you gained. So we decided to spend £3 million on players, £3 million on the stadium, and we kept the £3 million back for a rainy day. And so when we did get relegated, last game of the season, we didn't have to sell anyone. When you see clubs now and they get relegated from the Premier League, it's wholesale, Burnley, wholesale sales. Yeah. People have to go, you have to balance the books. We didn't have to do that. So in actual fact, I could strengthen the team because I had money to spend. So we strengthened the side and came straight back up.
Now, talking of money, I mean, what about the transfer market this week?
It's gone bonkers. It has gone bonkers, hasn't it? I mean, it's just incredible.
106 million?
Yeah. Chelsea paid, broke the record. But the amount of money, I did catch it the other day, I think the amount of money spent by Chelsea alone was more than all the Bundesliga put together.
Yeah, now doesn't this show us, actually, that I think 70% of all the transfer fees in Europe are English Premier League, which shows us that the European Super League wasn't necessary, was it?
No. And I think what is happening now, not only do the players want to come and play in the Premier League, but the managers want to come and manage in the Premier League. That's why so many of them are managing now. And, the Premier League goes to 180 countries.
Listen,
it's incredible.
I've been in New York, right?
Yeah.
Fridays, Saturdays in New York. Premier League's playing in the pubs in New York. They're spilling out onto the streets watching it. Every taxi driver you get into in a car on the east coast of America asks you which team you support. It's an amazing, successful global round. It really, really is. Charlton today in big trouble.
Well, I think that they've had a series of owners and it hasn't worked. And the team now is in Division 3, if you like.
Yeah, as it was. Yeah.
As it was, Division 1. And they're struggling to get it right. At the moment, there's talk about another takeover at the club. And with that brings, new ideas and new this and new that. The chairman at the moment has come in, saved the club from the previous regime, which wasn't very good. But he's had 4 managers in a couple of seasons, trying to be successful.
I was just thinking, 792 games in charge. Twice took him up to the Premier League. There's the Alan Kirbishley stand.
There is, yeah.
You're a blooming hero there, aren't you?
Yeah, absolutely. It was interesting when they...
Might they have you back?
Well, I do go back to watch the
That wasn't my question.
No, but It was really interesting when they asked me about the stand, because I thought most people got a stand named after them after they're long gone. I mean, long gone.
Which is why you may come back, Alan. You never know.
Yeah, the only trouble is, when they put my name up, they put the wrong name. My first name's really Llewellyn.
Okay, that doesn't matter.
There's no Alan in it at all.
That doesn't matter.
So it's Llewellyn, Curbishley. Right? But growing up in Canning Town, most of my mates couldn't say Llewellyn, let alone spell it. So it got shortened to Alan.
Well, you never know. And I must ask you quickly, you know, you went to West Ham, you were there for 70-odd games, left in very odd circumstances.
Yeah, well, what happened, I went there in relegation...
They stitched you up a bit, didn't they?
Well, I went there in a relegation battle.
Yeah.
And we stayed up. They called it the Great Escape. We won 7 out of the last 9 games.
Yeah.
Second season finished 10th. And then the financial crash came, 2008. And I was asked to raise a certain amount of money. I nearly got to it. The season had started. And what was happening behind the scenes, the hierarchy were telling agents, Nigel can go, he can go, try and find him a club. Yeah. And it was all behind me a little bit. And I was having the players coming to see me to say, look, you're trying to sell me. I go, no, I'm not trying to sell you. No, you're trying to sell me.
So you felt usurped, basically.
Yeah, so in the end, we played on the Saturday, West Ham, we beat Blackburn, and we ended up 5th in the league. And then I went into the dressing room and I was told that we had to sell a player, that it was deadline day, the next day I had to sell a player. And I had long-winded, but I had a clause in my contract that I was responsible for transfers, players coming in and coming out. So I don't think I had any other option. I was undermined.
Yeah.
And it was real sad because being a player there, and then going there as a manager,
East End boy,
and coming from that area, we stayed up, we finished mid-table.
It was a very odd.
Yeah.
Very odd.
I didn't have no option.
It was very odd. And I've got to ask you, I mean, you know, being a football manager, one of the most precarious jobs in the modern Western world. What are the qualities that make a good manager? You've done it very, very well. What are the qualities?
Well, firstly, you've got to have the respect of 20-odd players, or even more. How do you gain that respect? It's your training sessions. It's the way you deal with players. And it's the results. And, you know, when I first took over at Charlton, I phoned up 4 or 5 senior managers and said, go on then, give me some advice. And one of them went, win football matches. You'll be okay. And I've always thought that. But no, I think, especially today, when you're dealing with 20-odd millionaires or multi-millionaires, you've got to have that respect that when you're actually talking to them or putting the training session on, or telling them this is how we're going to go this weekend and this is how I think we're going to win the game, blah, blah, they've got to buy into it. And once they stop buying into it, as a manager, you're in trouble. So the leadership skills you need are not just on the field, they're off it as well.
Yeah, of course they are. Well, you've done it better than most. Alan, thank you for joining me.
I'm not even drunk any of my beer. Been talking too much.
The time now.
Been talking too much.
Thank you. We've got a few seconds left. Let's go to Barrage the Farage, see what you've sent me today. Oh, here we are. Stick with us, Alan. One viewer asks, are the owners of football clubs ruining the beautiful game? All these American buyers and everybody else.
Well, I think the difficulty of the foreign ownership is understanding the game. I mean, you hear these stories about American owners don't understand relegation, don't want relegation. Well, that's part and parcel of our game, because if you've not got the dream that Wrexham are having at the moment, that you can climb through them leagues, then you've got nothing.
Yeah, was it? And did we say earlier 4 Premier League clubs now under British ownership?
I think there's only 4.
Yeah.
British owners.
Yeah, I mean, look, the whole world wants to come here. That's great, but there are dangers with it too. Bobby asks, this government has lost the plot big time. Do you agree? Bobby, I've been telling you that for the last 18 months on this programme. They've lost the plot on many things, in particular on tax. You know, if ordinary working folks are getting dragged into 40p tax, which for many, many years was top-rate tax, they've lost the plot. Now, I'm done for this week. Next Thursday, I'm doing a live show, Farage at Large, in Luton. We've changed venues in the last few days. We've got a few more seats left. You want to come to Farage at Large, live in Luton, next Thursday, go to gbnews.uk. I'll be back here with you on Monday. Thanks for being with me all week. But now I'm going to hand you over into the very, very capable hands of Mark Dolan.
Nigel, thanks for another brilliant show. As our new monarch disappears from Australian banknotes, is King Charles losing his grip on the Commonwealth? Has he found that he's lacking the pulling power of our late great Queen? With wholesale energy prices falling, why are we paying so much to heat our homes? And following the departure of legendary Ken Bruce from Radio 2, has the BBC got a problem with older viewers and older listeners? All of that to come.
Good evening, I'm Alex Deakin, and this is your latest weather update. Friday will be dry for the vast majority, some cloud, but some sunny spells poking through, and a pretty mild day as well. The reason high pressure is anchored just to the south of us, but it's not completely dry at the moment, far from it. Of course, northern Scotland's been a very wet day thanks to these weather fronts. They are now edging south and will ease down as they do so, but they're also bringing gusty winds for the next few hours across eastern Scotland and northeast England, very blustery. The rain does fizzle as it sinks into southern Scotland and Northern Ireland, but a light rain and drizzle turning up in northwest England around dawn. To the south of that, most places dry, cloudy and very mild. 7 or 8 the low overnight. They're more typical of maxima at this time of year. Friday's weather then mostly cloudy with some rain early on over northwest England. Any early rain on the north coast of Northern Ireland should fizzle out, but another damp day in western Scotland, although the rain won't be as heavy as it has been through today, and it should ease off certainly by the afternoon along much of the west coast. Again, most of England and Wales dry. Quite a bit of cloud, but I'm hopeful for a few more breaks in the clouds. So some sunny spells, particularly eastern parts of Wales, southwest England, and it will be mild, 12, 13 degrees likely. As we go through Friday evening, again, most places just staying dry and cloudy, some drizzle at times on western coast and hills, particularly the Highlands, but I say generally a dry start to the weekend. Still a lot of cloud around, and we will see another weather front, another band of rain coming into the northwest during Saturday morning, and that'll spread across Northern Ireland by lunchtime, and then through the central parts of Scotland and into southern Scotland by the end of Saturday afternoon. Behind it, it turns a little brighter. For most of England and Wales, again, dry and cloudy, some drizzle over the hills in the west, and temperatures again above average, 11, 12, maybe 13 degrees Celsius. Look at the numbers for Sunday, though. We are going to see a dip in temperatures, turning cooler this weekend, but also plenty of sunshine on Sunday.